Hello, Bitcoin Basics listeners. Thank you for joining us. So what we have here is a series that I did for a local radio station in New Zealand called Fix the Money, Fix the World. Some of you might recognize that phrase. And what I've done is just gone through basic highlights of what's happening in the economy and how it actually affects the everyday person. So we've just uploaded those to the Bitcoin Basics podcast. Thank you, Gordon, for doing that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
The following podcast is a live recording of a radio show, first broadcast by FreshFM, with assistance from New Zealand On Air.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Faris Mali on Fix the Money, Fix the World, coming to you Monday mornings, 11 a.m. on FreshFM. Now, today we are actually going to look at central banks and their role in the financial society of each government. So specifically, we're going to look at the Royal Bank of New Zealand, and the announcement this last week predicated that they were going to be buying out the majority and full ownership of Kiwi Bank. So this was a government initiative where they are going to take full ownership of Kiwi Bank, which is it was a semi-private bank in New Zealand. And this actually comes on the heels of what in the last couple of years has been a move and in development by several countries around the world to adopt a central bank digital currency. So we're going to talk about a few things. We will probably, I'd say more than likely, take more than today's episode to talk about what is a central bank, what does it do, and also talk about a central bank digital currency. So for today, let's just look at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is an independent body. Unlike the Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve of the United States, that one is actually owned by private banks. So the Reserve Bank and Federal Reserve Bank of the United States is owned by several private banks and the Reserve Bank, or the Fed in the US, works in collaboration with the governments there. Now, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is independent. It is meant to be autonomous and apolitical. And what they're actually supposed to do, and this is according to the RBNZ themselves, is promote price stability and maximum employment. So price stability, we talked about this in episode 1. We talked about inflation. And the role of the Central Reserve Bank is to ensure that your cost of living essentially does not go up drastically. And I'll refer you to episode 1 of Fix the Money, where we talked about inflation, maximum employment, and be aware there's a difference here between maximum employment and full employment. Full employment is actually not a great thing. There are people in society who unfortunately cannot be employed. Maximum employment is the people that are able to participate in the workforce should find positions in the workforce. Now, what we're seeing in parts of the country right now is because we actually have a problem of not unemployment, but labor shortages. So several reasons for this. We'll probably have another episode that talks about the labor capacity. So what's the problem when you have a job that you are advertising and you can't get someone to fill that role? I don't know if you've been to a restaurant lately, but there's all these signs up saying due to extreme staff shortages, we're taking extra time. We've had to remove half the menu. I went to a restaurant recently where even though it was near on empty, they actually said they're at full capacity because they only had 2 chefs, which is half of what they normally have. So when you need labor, and so do other businesses, you're actually competing with each other. So what do you do then to entice people to work for you and not for the cafe next to you? Well, you have to offer them either benefits or quite simply a higher wage. So if you are looking to do laboring employment, then you're going to go with the person offering you $25 and not the business offering you $22. Now, the cafe that's going to offer you $25, unfortunately, they need to pass that on to the consumer. And this increases inflation and cost of living. So it's the RBNZ's job to promote price stability and maximum employment. These are their two mandates. So price stability also will refer to the interest rates that we pay. So they'll come out on a regular basis and say what the interest rate is. So they set the interest rates, and this is the interest rate for buying bonds. So the RBNZ will issue bonds. Now, what is a bond? So let's just say that you believe in, and I'll just take a random company, XYZ Productions. And this is a company that you think is going to go do very, very well. And you want to be involved in that company as a shareholder. So you'll buy a stock. So if X, Y, and Z, say you bought it at $5 and they take off, they're doing very well, and you sell the stock down the line for $10, well, you've doubled your money. So a bond is issued by a country. So when you're buying a bond, you're basically saying, I trust this country. So there's a saying in investments is you buy bonds and wear diamonds. So when things are not doing very well in the world, you buy bonds because you think, okay, companies, we've seen a lot of companies go under with the government lockdowns that have been issued around the world, with the global supply chain issues. We haven't seen countries go under. There is a caveat to that, which I'll get to. So if you are putting your money in the government, you're basically saying, I think companies are too risky to invest right now. I want to take my risk off. I want a risk off trade. I'm going to put that in bonds. So with bonds, they don't go up that much in value compared to a company, historically speaking, but they do give you an interest rate. You get paid a higher interest for investing in a bond. That's called a coupon. So the RBNZ will basically come out and say, here's what the interest rate is. That is setting the interest rate for their bonds, but it's also setting what's called the interbank interest rate. Or we'll talk about that in a second. So the caveat that I wanted to mention with bonds is, say, during the financial crisis, 2008 and then 2014-15 in Europe, countries like Greece and Italy were not doing very well. So not many people would buy bonds in Greece and Italy when they were in the midst of a financial crisis. So how do you entice investors? Well, where the US and Germany were offering 3 to 4% interest on their bonds, Greece went up to, I think, 15%, maybe even up to 20%. So that's what you do to entice investors into risky bonds. You provide them with a higher yield. Now, you might get a very high yield on that. So something that's paying you back 18%. So if you put 100 grand in, you're making 18 grand a year on that bond. The problem is that those countries can default. And this has happened. Several countries around the world have actually defaulted on their debt, which means you, as an investor, you may have been getting 18%, but at the end of the day, that 100 grand that you invested, that's defaulted and you can lose your money. So buy bonds, wear diamonds is when things are unsure in the world. If stock markets are tanking, then people will buy hard assets, diamonds and gold and real estate to a degree, and invest in bonds because bonds are representative of governments. Governments are representative of people. People are taxpayers. They're still there. So the overnight cash rate, this basically, how do banks set their interest? And they go by what the royal banks are doing. If the royal banks increase their interest rate, then banks will go up as well. And it's not par for par. So if the RBNZ interest rate is 2%, banks don't run at 2%. They run differently. So a bank basically has to make money on the spread. So what that means is if you go in and say you put $100,000 and you're getting 4% interest. So you're getting 4% on $100,000. That's $4,000 a year. Then the bank will go out and give someone a home loan at 6.5%. And they're making $6,500. It's more than that, but that's what they're making when they're giving someone a home loan. So if Edna goes in, puts her deposit down in a term deposit, she gets 4%. And then Julie comes in and she gets a 6.5% loan. That 2.5% difference, that's where banks make their money. That's called the spread. So the interest rates that banks provide is higher than what the RBNZ goes by. Now, how do banks do this? Well, there was actually a case that came out about 10 years ago in the UK. So the UK goes by what they call the LIBOR rate, LIBOR. And what they do is they actually call about 12 to 13 banks, and they ask them, what are you charging each other? Because banks actually lend money to each other overnight, and they have an overnight rate, which is a lot higher. Reason banks do this is because they might have over-invested in some risky assets and they need more cash on their books. So banks are only allowed, there's a certain maximum of activity or debt that banks are allowed to go into. So if they are over that debt threshold, they'll contact another bank down the road, say, can you just lend us money? We just need it on our books overnight. We'll pay it back to you tomorrow. And they'll say, sure. And they'll charge them 10% overnight. So it is unethical, but it is legal. So in the UK, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is their Treasury Department, or the Royal Bank of Scotland, I forget which one will do this, but they call the banks and they actually say, what are you charging each other? And they'll tell them. And then the bank will actually set their interest rate depending on the activity of the private banks. But what actually happened was it turns out that these banks in the UK were colluding with each other. So they're actually calling each other, emailing each other and saying, what will you tell the central bank here when they call us? So they're actually lying to them. And the reason we found out about this was they're doing it in emails and not covering their tracks. But this actually affects people because the Royal Bank and the RBNZ and the Reserve, they set interest rates that affect car payments, credit card repayments, and home loans. So when banks are lying about this, it has a huge trickle-down effect. And this is something that happened in the UK. It was a huge scandal in the UK. The other things that central banks will do, and we've seen a lot of this since 2008, and we spoke about this previously on the show in episode 1, is quantitative easing. So quantitative easing is when we think the system is failing and we create more cash. So it is almost as simple as hitting Control P and printing cash. But what it is they're doing this digitally. So the Federal Reserve in America will basically create more bonds and sell them to the Treasury. So this is a department affiliated with the government that's creating the money. So in New Zealand, the Royal Bank of New Zealand, they're the ones that actually print and create cash. But then what do they do with it? They have to sell it to the government. And remember, who was the government? It's you, the taxpayer. So in 2008 happened, the Federal Reserve Bank in America said, we need more money in the system. We don't want the economy to slow down. So they created more money, brought interest rates down, hoping that people will borrow that money, buy new cars, still invest in property. That didn't happen. We did go into detail on this in our first episode. But that is part of what a central bank does. All right, that is a very, very crude summary of a central bank. There are plenty of books out there that describe central banks, periods of what they do, what they don't do, their, if you will, their accuracy or success rate, and even periods where we didn't have central banks. How well did economies function? I'll link those on my website. That's www.farismali.com. But for now, we are going to play some music. This is Here It Goes Again by OK Go. That was Here It Goes Again by OK Go. So if you are just joining us, this is Faris Mali on Fix the Money, Fix the World, coming to you on FreshFM. And today we've been talking about the Royal Bank of New Zealand and central banks in general. And we've just gone over what is the role of a central bank. And one of those roles is they're the ones that actually produce the cash that goes into society. And this is coming up on the news that the government in New Zealand is actually buying out Kiwi Bank, haven't taken complete ownership over it. And this comes on the heels of what's been in development for a couple years now, a central bank digital currency. So what is a central bank digital currency? Now, I'm just going to read off of a paper that the Royal Bank of New Zealand themselves released. This was actually after a period of consultation with the public where people could log in to a website and provide their views and opinions on it. Let me just read this statement. The declining use, acceptance, and availability of cash in New Zealand and emerging innovations in private money, namely stablecoins, make this an opportune time to consider a central bank digital currency. All right, let's analyze that a little bit. So declining use, acceptance, and availability of cash in New Zealand. So this is declining use obviously means less and less people using cash. Acceptance over the government lockdowns and what we saw in the last few years is people did not want to manhandle cash. So they're asking just to use credit cards, pay wave. Availability of cash. So probably the declining use of ATMs and branches closing down. So cash has become less and less of the norm in society. And emerging innovations in private money, namely stablecoins. Now, what they're actually referring to here is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Stablecoins is something different than those. So I don't know if they've understood it or just for simplicity's sake, they've rolled everything into one as a stablecoin. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency use is not very predominant here in New Zealand. In countries that have had high inflation, it has been strongly beneficial to those people because their cash has been inflated away. Thinking of countries like Venezuela, a lot of African countries where the price of bread at the end of the day is higher than the morning. So you cannot rely on your central bank currency because they're in periods of hyperinflation. So Bitcoin has been fantastic for them because it basically means that they've found a way of not being dependent on their national currency, which drops in value on an hourly basis. So stablecoins is something entirely different. So a stablecoin, this is something that Facebook was looking at launching, where if you wanted to buy something on Facebook, you'd have to use PayPal. So if you are in New Zealand, you want to buy something from an American company on Facebook, you use PayPal, and it goes through that whole conversion rate. Well, Facebook was thinking that why don't we just create our own coin? And this was a project that actually looked into doing. And if you think about it, this could be a severe hit to the economies of many countries because because Facebook has many billions of users. That's a huge marketplace. So banks, PayPal, Western Union, all these companies actually rely on transfers to make money. That's how they make their fees. But if you just bought into a stable coin, a Facebook coin, and you use that, then that's really disrupting the banking system. So an opportune time to consider a central bank digital currency. So what is a central bank digital currency then? So think of it this way. We've actually become very accustomed in the last few years to using our phone everywhere we go and just to scanning it in every time we walk into a shop. Now, at the moment, there is no direct relationship between you, the consumer, and the taxpayer, and the central bank. They actually have no direct relationship with you. There are central banks that you deal with. If you want to get a bank account, you open that up with, for example, Kiwi Bank. And then the only direct relationship you'll have with a reserve bank, well, there isn't one. So what they're trying to say here, or what they're actually trying to do, and they have done these in countries, and we'll talk about this in detail in the next episode. So the way Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies work is they live on the blockchain, and this actually, you access a Bitcoin wallet on your phone. So you, with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, you are your own bank. There is no middle person. Bitcoin removed the bank as an intermediary, so you can send money from one phone to another without going through a third party. If you want to go learn more about Bitcoin, please visit my website, farismali.com, and there's links there where I do a separate podcast purely about Bitcoin. But a central bank digital currency is essentially the same premise. We're going to put a digital wallet on your phone. And what we can do is, instead of you going to an ATM and withdrawing cash, that money appears on your phone. So there's no need to go to an ATM to grab cash. The other thing that this could potentially do is, if you look at it this way, how do you pay your taxes? You need to submit a tax return at the end of every financial year. And if you're owe something, then you have to pay the bank back. And the bank, the central bank, the government is actually presuming that you're acting in fairness. You know, you type the end of the thing, everything I say is true for as far as I know. And if you get audited, then that's how they find out that maybe you didn't pay what you're owed. Well, a central bank digital currency, you wouldn't have that, because what would happen is they could see every money that you spend. So if we go 100% central bank digital currency, which means all the money that you use is on your phone and it's provided by the central bank. So instead of cash, instead of a third-party bank, a commercial bank, you have a direct relationship with them. Then it means no one's going to cheat on their taxes. It means we get rid of cash, and cash is what's actually used for illicit nefarious purposes, because cash can't be traced. So that is the long-term potential of a central bank digital currency. It is forming a direct relationship between you and the government, a financial relationship, because at the moment there's intermediaries, there's the banks. And the banks themselves, they're the ones that have to go by KYC and AML, know your customer and anti-money laundering rules. So they're the ones that have to ensure that the person they're dealing with is not a criminal. So there's a lot of things that the banks do. A central bank digital currency right now is basically saying what we could do is just get rid of cash, because no one uses cash. And Sweden has done a lot as far as removing cash from their society, and so have other countries. But it could actually do more than that. So here again, I'm just going to read from the Reserve Bank themselves. The Reserve Bank's overall belief is that a CBDC, central bank digital currency, would be a useful development for central bank money, because it would both support the value anchor role of central bank money and support the ability of central bank money to act as a fair and equal way to pay and save. So a value anchor role is central bank money. So I talked about this before. Why do people buy bonds in countries? Because they're seen as a safe bet. Unlike corporations, companies don't go, governments don't go bankrupt as often. The ability of a central bank money to act as a fair and equal way to pay and save. So they're actually saying, the central bank can now be your bank where you buy things and save money. So that's what they're saying, is that we can now, the role that you've had with a bank, where the bank would provide term deposits, you have an everyday account that you pay for things, the central bank can now actually do that. So this is what they couldn't do that with cash, because once you take cash out, they don't know where it goes. There's an $800 limit for you to take cash out every single day. Once you take that $800 out, they don't know where that's going to go. They can't control cash. But if you have access on your phone, and if you scan that phone everywhere you go, we just wave the phone over a merchant point of sale, they know where that money's going. They know if it needs to be taxed. They know how much GST you've paid. They can track everything. So essentially what this is actually doing is it is saying cash is obsolete, it's becoming less desirable, and we do know there's a criminal element for cash. It's what criminals use because they can hide it. Well, how about we remove that? So we are removing cash. We, as a society, have become accustomed to using our phones everywhere we go. I mean, we just, scan a barcode to walk into a restaurant now. So we've become very accustomed and conditioned even to using our phones everywhere we go. So why is it that wherever we go, the central banks will keep track of what we spend, how we spend it, and they can do that. And we'll talk about examples in this next week. That way they know, can we pay your taxes? Have you paid your taxes? Have you overpaid or underpaid your taxes? Everything that you do is therefore logged digitally. And that's so much easier than, say, at the end of the year, meeting with your accountant and having to go through receipts, because all your receipts are there available in your wallet. It's all in your history, having to go through all that. So a central bank sees this as a future where we can use this technology. Okay, everyone has these smartphones. They use these smartphones to save, to buy. Why not use them as a central bank to replace cash? So that's what the introduction to this paper is about. I do want to read one more thing. Over time, central bank money has proven more robust than commodity-backed money. So we talked about commodity-backed money early on, I think, and we will actually have another episode devoted solely to the gold standard. This is a statement I personally would disagree with, simply because commodity-backed money does not inflate like fiat money. So fiat money is money that is essentially what we are all using now. And we've seen since 1974, when the United States officially went off the gold standard and every country followed suit, that's when inflation started to absolutely take a rip, was since 1974, when we went off the gold standard. So I personally would disagree with that. I don't believe central bank money is more robust than commodity-backed money. It's easier to print. It's easier to, and in a sense, get into more debt, which is the problem that we've had. All right, I am going to finish off with another song, but hopefully hopefully I was not too difficult. I just wanted to go, what is a central bank? What is central bank digital currencies? And then next week, we are actually going to look into examples of central bank digital currencies in the wild in work. All right, we are going to listen to Money Grabber from Fitz and the Tantrums now.
The podcast you just listened to was a live recording of a radio show, first broadcast on FreshFM with support from New Zealand On Air. FreshFM is a community access media station based in Te Tauihu, the top of the South Island, New Zealand. The funding of Access Media makes these podcasts possible. To find similar programs by other community access media stations, go online to accessmedia.nz. If you or your group would like to know more about how you can have a program on our station, please contact us. Visit our website freshfm.net for our contact details.